I want to introduce you to Allyn Condon, who's joined me in the studio to talk about really a story that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. Allyn and Jenny had a baby earlier this year, a little boy called Ben, who died just weeks later after being in hospital. And Allyn's here to tell us a lot more about it. Central to the story at the moment is a meeting that took place between Allyn and Jenny and some of the hospital in question and their staff. It was openly recorded, this meeting, by both parties. Let's hear a clip from it. This, Allyn, is when you and your wife were in the room.
You know, we've been lied to along the way. We've been misled with information.
We didn't even get told how he died for 7 weeks. It's disgusting.
And this timeline's just the start of it. You know, we haven't even touched on the child death review yet, because everything in there, everything that has happened, and that was a reflection in the death review. This is inaccurate. This is all we have of our child. This is a child death review about our child, and this is inaccurate. Every single section has holes in it, and it's inaccurate. It's inaccurate logging. It's inaccurate information. You know, it's just not acceptable. You know. Okay. Maybe this would be time to get a tiny bit of fresh air for a couple of minutes.
Well, at that point, as you heard, Allyn and his wife went out to get some air, and this is what happened next.
They're absolutely right.
They've got a point. I don't know what to say.
These are not misinformed parents, are they?
But
okay, so it's whether they want to go through the CDR, and you'll say you've got time. That's going to.
Well, I think to go through the CDR, it's going to take about another 2 hours, isn't it?
It's whether, is what we've taken away from what they've already said. So I've got 8 fairly key significant issues here.
I mean,
Is there any possibility of taking off that last?
I'll do that. I'll go back when we'll finish and take that out.
So I just forgot that we're still recording. Because that could get us into difficulty.
I don't know how to do it without deleting the whole thing.
I don't know how to do it without deleting the whole thing with those last words there. Allyn is with me now. Thanks for coming in, Allyn.
Thank you.
Ben's dad, Allyn. For people who, you'll have heard that conversation and listened back to it many times, I'm sure. It's not all as clear to us listening as it will be for you. But let me just remind people of tell people some of the stuff that was said. Is there any possibility of taking off that last bit, the bit where they had said you're not bullshit, misinformed parents, you've got a point? I'll go back when we finish and take that out. I just forgot it was still recording because that could get us into difficulty, and on it goes. How did you establish that element of the recording was there? How did you establish how incriminating that was for them?
Well, when we left the room at the end of sort of that part of the session, we went out, and when we come back into the room, one of the consultants had hold of the phone, and he'd
and both parties knew you'd been recording your conversation.
Both parties were recording, and as it comes out on that recording, the trust have realised that their recording was still going. They've stopped their recording and then continued to talk without realising that ours was still recording. And it was a little while after that they realised ours was recording. And then that's obviously when they picked up the phone to make sure that sort of everything else.
And when did you realise what was on it, if you see what I mean?
It was on our drive on the way home, and I think that one of the lines that was sort of missing at the beginning there was it's the first thing that's said when we go out the room is that they're right, and what they're referring to is the fact that we've just had a lengthy discussion about Ben's care and about the fact that antibiotics weren't given, and so that was the end of the conversation, and they were referring to the fact that we were right over that care.
Absolutely right is what they say on the tape, isn't it?
And then obviously it goes on in this other section, but we were driving home in the car and we listened to that, and we'd presented 2 hours in that meeting plus another 3 meetings previously, and we'd presented a very good case about the failings in care of Ben, and It'd all been dismissed. I mean, we'd been told several lies along the way. We'd been misled. We'd been told blood tests had been done that hadn't. We'd even been told that the blood test results were negative.
And you had taken him into hospital. He was unwell. You were told straight away that he had an infection, were you? Or did that come later?
So he came home from hospital after he was born. He was born premature and he came home. He was in Southmead Hospital in Bristol, and he came home and was home for 3 days, and he picked up a cold, and we took him back to the hospital, which was the Children's Hospital. And he had a viral infection, and he started to progress, and a couple of days after being in there, he started to deteriorate and get worse. And the hospital told us that they believed he had a second infection, and that they were going to treat that infection with antibiotics. But that went on for 4 days, and despite several tests, they failed to treat him with antibiotics for 4 days.
And you were told that blood tests had been done and found negative, and that's turned out not to be the case.
The blood tests weren't done. They failed to do it. So there was 2 occasions over 3 days where they never done blood tests for up to about 40 hours, despite them believing that he had an infection.
What's interesting also on that recording, the recording that they didn't know was being recorded, once they realise it's been recorded, they start to say, well, with little babies it can go either way, even if you had given antibiotics. And then another doctor in the room, I struggle to see why he wasn't given antibiotics. And that's yours and your wife's struggle, isn't it? You struggle to see why he wasn't as well.
Almost definitely. And that the part of the recording that you're referring to, where they say about, even if we give babies antibiotics, the one bit of information that we've had back off the recording, off everyone who's listened to it, is it was such a scripted. Once they realised the recording was still going, she then went into this real scripted. We don't know if it would have made any difference, and and it was so obvious that she'd done that.
What's happened since this emerged? Since once you and your wife had realised what had happened to this recording, what was on it? What did you do then?
Well, we were in the process of speaking to the hospital, but the hospital wasn't giving us any answers. They were giving us answers, misleading information, and we got to the point where we contacted the hospital and we said to them, are you aware of the section of the recording that we have? And they were said, they were aware of it. And then it was only when we sent them the transcript of it, that all of a sudden then they opened up a fresh investigation where they found several failings, and so this is ongoing now. Now they've now investigated.
And the failings were failings to act, essentially.
Failings to treat Ben, and ultimately on Ben's final day, he wasn't seen by a senior consultant for over 7 hours, and he was left to have a cardiac arrest. And then they finally prescribed antibiotics at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but didn't give them until 8:30 at night.
And this was hours after he'd established he had sepsis, which is extremely serious.
Yeah, so they established he had sepsis, and then after that they then decided to give him antibiotics. So
but even that wasn't straight away, was it?
No, there was a 5.5 hour delay, and when we asked them why they'd not give them, they told us they forgot.
That was the reason for the delay.
That was the reason for the delay.
What kind of unit was it? Did it seem pressure? No, but did it seem under pressure to you? Staff-wise, numbers?
No, it didn't, but it's difficult because I don't think it was full at the time, but it's difficult as a parent because you're there
focusing on your
child, so you don't really see so much going on. But there was a complete complacency towards Ben's care. The amount of times we were told he has a cold, he will get over it, and I believe that their complacency led them to a course of action, what they thought was acceptable.
You said that they've accepted some failures, but they haven't accepted total responsibility yet, have they?
No, they're a mile off accepting responsibility. They've accepted things like, so they've said, we could have given antibiotics earlier, but we don't think it would have made any difference. Now, they've also put out several statements now to say that, had we done these blood tests that we said we'd done, then we don't think it would have changed the outcome anyway. But they've also already accepted to us that antibiotics should have been given on at least the Thursday morning. So the statements they're putting out now just don't make any sense to us.
I mentioned to you off mic before we began speaking on air that yesterday I had an hour on this programme talking about NHS failures and people who'd complained and how those complaints had gone. The Health Ombudsman herself said there is a wall of silence put up to families and relatives, and they're left distraught. How has this left you feeling about the NHS?
You know what? This isn't a witch hunt against the NHS for us. This is a particular trust and particular consultants within a trust. But unfortunately, the CEO of that particular trust seems to believe that the behaviour of those consultants is acceptable, and that in itself means that his behaviour is not acceptable, and unfortunately for us, we will now have to go outside the trust to get this investigated. We heard some of the stuff yesterday about all the parliamentary ombudsman. One of the reasons we haven't gone down that route is because we wanted to give the hospital the opportunity to give us answers.
And if they don't, you will.
We will, but we've warned the hospital on many occasions. If we don't get answers, we will go to the media, and we've told them. And I believe that the CEO of the trust believes he is protecting his consultants. However, I don't think he realises that the outcome will eventually be worse for those consultants.
Do you believe other patients are in danger at that hospital because of the attitude of staff and leadership?
I believe there was a definite complacency towards Ben's care, and I would be a fool to think that Ben was, just the only one. I believe that there's been so many mistakes from the consultants, the nurses, up to the CEO, that I just don't believe that we were the unlucky ones that had that many mistakes. So probably, I do believe that people are at risk there.
Allyn, thank you. Sorry for your and your wife's loss. Thank you for coming in and talking to us about it.
This, at its heart, is a Conservative Party issue and a Conservative Party problem. I think the way that the investigation has been handled by the Conservative Party has been shambolic. At the end of the day, if it wasn't for Paul Abbott and myself encouraging people to make these complaints...